Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. About 2 months ago, Janice and I were in Canada. We were in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and it's a port city, and we had the opportunity to visit the Immigration Museum, which is basically, it was, if you think of Canada's equivalent of Ellis Island in New York, where so many immigrants, including those from Ireland, were processed and then made new lives for themselves in Canada. And after we looked around that museum, we took a walk out along the waterfront. And as we were walking along the waterfront, we saw this really old-fashioned looking boat. I mean, really, really old-fashioned. I don't mean 50 or 100 years old. This was like made out of wood. And so we stopped and had a look at it and realized we could go on board. And what it was, it's an exact replica, the same size, everything, of the flagship Trinidad. Whenever Ferdinand Magellan sailed around the world, the first expedition to sail around the world. And I love history, and Janice also is interested in history, so this is just fascinating. And as we walked around that boat, we just realized what an incredible thing it was, not just to sail around the world, but even to attempt what they did. Because you see, people at that time, they knew that the world was round. They knew that America was to the west, but they weren't sure quite if you could find your way right the way round and if you could sail around. And so what they did, they wanted to sail to the Spice Islands, the Moluccas, in modern day Indonesia, because at that time spices were incredibly valuable. In fact, just ordinary spices like peppercorns were worth more in weight than gold was. And so they wanted to find, instead of sailing east round the tip of Africa, they wanted to see if they could get to the Spice Islands by sailing west. And so they sailed across the Atlantic, they sailed down the coast of South America, through the straits that they could take a slight shortcut there to get across into the Pacific, which today is called the Straits of Magellan. And then they had the idea that it would just be a few days sailing to reach the Spice Islands, because they had no idea what lay beyond the tip of South America. And of course there was the Pacific Ocean. I mean, they had this massive ocean, far greater than, they thought they'd basically done all the hard sailing crossing the Atlantic, but the hard bit still lay ahead of them, crossing the Pacific, getting to the Spice Islands, and then finding their way all the way back to Spain. Now, in the end, Magellan didn't make it. Magellan, he died actually in battle, in a battle on the Philippines, and most of the ships sank, including the Trinidad, the flagship, and only one ship made it back. But that was the first ever recorded circumnavigating the globe, which was an amazing achievement in world history. But the thing that really amazed me was I've read a book about Magellan, I've watched documentaries, everything else. I've always found it a fascinating story. But what really amazed me was how tiny the boat was. I mean, you think a flagship, you're thinking of something big. This boat was tiny. I wouldn't cross the Irish Sea in that boat. And these people sailed around the world. You know, the sense of adventure, the sense of courage that they had in doing that is absolutely breathtaking. And yet, many of us need that kind of courage, because God takes us on journeys in our lives and we don't know what lies ahead. And if we could see what lies ahead, we might even say, Lord, I'm not sure I really want to do this. It's like if they'd known how much it took to cross the Pacific Ocean, they probably wouldn't have attempted the journey in the first place. But God, in his grace and his mercy, does not show us our entire journey and everything that's going to happen. He gives us little glimpses of it. But you know what? He takes us on a journey that is a journey of faith. And it's only whenever we have achieved what God set out to do with us that we suddenly look back and say, wow, I might not have done this if I knew what it was going to take, but I'm so glad that God has taken me on this journey. And maybe you're in a place today where you're not quite sure what the future has for you, and it feels like you've gone a long way and you feel like you've still got a long way to go. But I want to tell you, God has got your back and God is holding you by your hand. He's taking you on a journey. You know, those guys set out in faith and it was amazing what they did, but they had no final assurance. But we have a final assurance that God is taking us on a journey of his purpose and his plans for us are plans for good, not for evil. May you enjoy a wonderful, exciting, great journey with God today. In Jesus' name. God bless you. Join us next time for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.